autism, copious amounts of free time, and military hardware. These combined have been the destroyer of hundreds of hours of people's lives over debates of which dumpster fire of a vehicle is better than the other. Given the fact that every real-life example has been done to death and has over 800 videos, we've decided to work on some fictional ones. We will be going over specifically fictional tanks.
Yes, we'll be going around listing out the upsides, downsides, and quirks of each vehicle. To start off, we'll be going with the Automaton tank from Helldivers 2.
Tank! 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 Some kind of super ass zombie! Gigantic thing! Holy shit!
What the hell is that? That's not a tank.
Shit, they beat you good. Let me heal you.
Moving on to the actual tank at hand, the Automaton Annihilator tank is one of the absolutely worst tanks on this list. It's slow as all hell, doesn't have any significant armor, consistently dies to ground troops without any significant firepower, let alone what the Helldivers have in their vast arsenal. The 3 mile an hour speed, the main glaring weakness is the entire backside of the tank, which is easily flanked by anything, given it also has a terrible turning speed. Armor, while better than the rear armor by quite a bit, is still much weaker than the front, which already can be done in by rockets and quasar cannon shots. Back to the caboose, though the tank gives one promise, in rain, fog, snow, hail, whatever it be, you will have one guarantee to see the large glowing exhaust port from miles away.
This glowing weak point takes full damage from literally anything, and massively damages the entirety of the tank. Yes, this includes small arms fire from pistols and rifles. Now, I would like to make it clear that most tanks make up for their weaknesses in some way, shape, or form. The only thing this tank has going for it is its admittedly excellent accuracy, energy efficiency, and fire rate. I would say firepower, but given the fact that both the machine guns and main cannon are barely able to deal with infantry, I believe it is safe to say that the firepower is not adequate enough to fight nearly anything else, especially anything armored. This tank is just a glorified gun turret, which the automatons already have many of.
On from the Tesla of tanks, we're going to go over another complete disgrace to the tank name, but just a little less so. This still runs off of clean energy and still has its fair share of flaws. It's definitely a tier or two above the Automaton tank, but don't let that fool you into thinking it's effective in most environments. We present to you the Covenant Wraith.
Yes, the Wraith, a beautiful and slick design, boasting the absolutely worst range of any tank on this list. That is not an exaggeration, and possibly any tank in most fiction, to be honest. A Wraith can maybe lob around down a small portion of the battlefield without any significant results, especially given the fact that the mortars can be easily dodged, even by other tanks. Slow ones. The ball of plasma that it shoots seems to have a generally abysmal range of around 300-ish meters, and takes 3 to 5 business days to land. The Wraith is most effective in, uh, um, hmm.
Well, I can tell you right now it's not sneaking because it shoots out a giant glowing beacon. It's not speed either because it has the equivalent of a fat man's stamina while eating Arby's, sweating as he lifts his arm to put the burger in his mouth. Love the 3 second boost. That will maybe save me from a grenade or a rocket. Now, how about durability? Oh, wait, not that either. There's no lock for the driver's hatch, so anyone can open it. Not that it matters, because most people can just crumple said hatch with their fists. The Wraith also has no rear armor to speak of in most respects. It also dies in a few shots from any significant weaponry.
I know the best attribute of the Wraith: the weight. It weighs 47 tons, literally crushing the competition, and there we leave it off on its only high note we can find. And now on to the next tank. Next, we have an absolutely saddening example of a tank that meets zero military expectations when it comes to the universe it is stuck in. The Britanian tank from Code Geass. A piece of machinery that is more of a background piece than an actual useful asset on the battlefield. This is especially the case when you have adults flying around in supersonic mechs, blasting fighter jets out of the air, and doing massive damage to cities. The machinery has a six-wheel propulsion system with an unknown engine. Not much of a surprise, given that it is allegedly most likely just a modified version of the Britanian APC. Given how durable the vehicle is, you might as well assume that APC means Adolf Panic Command Center, because crewing this thing is tantamount to suicide.
Well, sadly, you won't be doing the killing yourself, and you don't know who will be coming for you. While we may not know the caliber of this tank's weaponry, what we do know is it can't be anything impressive. Also lacking in all of their armor outside of frontal, it can be easily pierced by RPGs, which is not very good given the giga powerful weapons on the nightmare frames seen in the show. Best parts is the fact that it's a six-wheel drive that is significantly worse than having normal tracks, because it's primarily assigned to urban areas due to lack of traction. Up against tracked vehicles and especially mechs. So overall, doesn't really belong in Code Geass or the real world, unless you want to throw it somewhere in World War One, maybe World War Two. It might be okay. Other than that, this tank is a terrible relic of the past, and it should stay there.
Next, we have the Cobra tank from Batman Arkham Knight. As a more unique one, we have a tank rarely seen and most likely rarely remembered. We only saw about 6 of these in total, but they had an impressive showing overall for what they were. Each of them are tanks designed to take out one of the strongest cars in fiction, the Batmobile. Now, in the end, they did definitively fail at their job, but they're the definition of going out swinging. As without hitting them with EMP devices or spending the time to try and hack these things, they're rather reliably hard to take down. They have armor that is able to withstand multiple HVAP rounds, that's high velocity armor piercing, from a 60mm gun to the front and side of the armor. Similar to the Automaton tank, the number one downside to this tank is the fact that a shot to the exhaust port will obliterate it.
Yes, but a good upside is the fact that given their compact size, they are able to easily patrol local neighborhoods and drive onto the street without massively disrupting traffic. How another downside is the fact that the designers really skimped out on the targeting system as a whole. It's a 90-degree cone of vision and needs multiple seconds to lock on to any target. It may be able to weather most blows, but needing to take unnecessary hits is absolutely not an upside. Just because you can bash your forehead into a wall doesn't mean it's good for you. Mind you, of course, this is likely a game design choice, especially when given the fact that real-life modern tanks have a 360-degree thermal scope. To account for the fact this is a remote-controlled tank, it makes up for most of its shortcomings with no risk of human life.
Though this is an exact opposite of the Britanian tank, at least in most respects. Great armor, good firepower, 100% crew survivability, and it likely has better off-roading due to the tracks it uses instead of wheels.
Moving on from the RC cars, we switch over to the original Helldivers. And original Helldivers, I of course mean the Earth Defense Force. And since we're still singing the tune of terrible tank songs, we'll be talking about an OG, the E551 Gigantis tank, the equivalent of the grease gun for the Air Raider class, a class that specializes in spawning things in to help its allies. We have a tank that has little to no durability to speak of, only has enough room for one person, and dares to cost nearly as much, not as much, but nearly as better alternatives. You could use your points on hundreds of different things. Airstrikes, giant mechs, or you can play in the mud with this little baby tank. On higher difficulty missions, you're just a box rolling around labeled ant food.
Starting tank in the game, it does very little damage along with its tiny amount of armor. However, it does have one massive upside. It'll make you feel extremely humble that in 2035, when the game takes place, they made sure to give you the bottom of the barrel tank. It's worse than most tanks in the modern day, and rather than giving you the quad railgun tank that you can later get, you get this piece of shit. All of this to teach you one lesson: never play Air Raider. It is the absolute worst class in the game. You are literally just in the background being support for yourself and nobody else because you already know you steal all the vehicles. It's you. And you still do the least amount of damage by the end of the mission. End yourself. Now, you serve zero purpose. Next on our list is the Armored Core Centaur tank from Armored Core Project Phantasma. Seemingly inspired by the Leopard 2A5 and closely resembling the British Challenger in the actual game, this is essentially just a modern tank heavily upgraded to fight early generation armored cores. The main armament is a 120mm cannon that seems to only shoot rockets for whatever dumbass reason, and the secondary armament is a twin 20mm autocannon.
Used by the Doomsday Corporation, these tanks make a feeble attempt to take on the main protagonist in his armored core. The fact that they're a tank and the player's in a mech about 3 times the size of them, the only reason this thing poses any kind of threat is because the one game this tank appears in, they decided to have barely functional camera controls. Now, even when half blind and not using the armored core to its full effectiveness, this tank is the equivalent of a kid throwing a rock at the back of your head, and then you mailing their parents a pipe bomb made of 200 pounds of tannerite and destroying the entire city block. So, in short, mediocre tank that's far above its pay grade. Now, moving on to the other better half of the list.
In gears now, we're going to talk about some actual good tanks. Those first 6 were absolutely not good at their role overall. The first on the good list is the Scorpion tank from Halo.
Gears. I'm from Gears of War 5. I'm the protagonist.
No one's talking to you! Get out!
Troll the locust
Leave
with
us
my
alone!
mind.
Okay. Anyways, about the Scorpion tank. The most prolific tank in the Halo franchise, shooting 90mm tungsten rounds at 40% the speed of light. Wait, what? That doesn't sound right.
It's correct. I fact-checked it on Reddit.
Reddit's not a reliable source ever.
Well, now he's just blatantly wrong. Now back to the Scorpion tank. This baby's a 6-seater, weighing well over 30 tons, and has a maximum speed of 80 miles an hour, going faster than your grandma on the freeway, and shooting massive tungsten rounds that can pierce even the heaviest of Covenant armor. Able to easily do medium to long range engagements. It does have a few downsides, however, one of them being the lack of cover for the gunner, and the other being the very minimal cover for the driver, allowing anyone with a rifle and good enough aim to get a quick and easy takedown. There's also another useless feature along with it, being able to ride on top of the track armor, giving you technically 4 additional seats, where you can be easily picked off by anyone with good aim.
Aside from that, this is one of the best mainstay tanks in all of fiction, even having good armor. It is able to tank nearly anything and everything, taking multiple hits from the heaviest weapons in every game to destroy it. If only someone would fix the hijacking issue of every single vehicle in Halo. Going way back to ye olden times, we have a tank that would get absolutely dumpstered by any other tank on this list. Yes, even some of the worst ones. This is the steam tank from Warhammer 3. Now, despite being a technological marvel, a tank that runs off of steam, it's a hulking menace that is nearly unstoppable when it arrives on the battlefield. Of course, unless your enemy has a large amount of cannonballs or explosives to put you down. Any type of infantry that doesn't specialize in fighting heavy units will crumple and break underneath the wheels of this monstrosity.
This behemoth has 3 main weapons, the first one being ramming speed, a multi-ton block of metal hitting you and launching your corpse into the distance. The second one being a steam-powered cannon, shooting cannonballs at any nearby threat. And the third one, the most devastating of all, is the steam gun. This is a turret mounted on top of the tank that is able to spray all of the excess steam used to propel the vehicle. This weapon provides one of the most horrifying deaths to the enemy. The only thing this tank will struggle against are elite enemies, and anything close to the same size of it.
Mind that in Warhammer Total War, they lean heavily into the fantasy. So while it will still perform decently, it can end up going against things like dragons, 10,000-year-old undead pharaohs, and triceratopses.
Next we have Air Mech Arena, a horribly dead game, but it's still near and dear to my heart. We'll be talking about a beautiful tank from this game, the Devastator, a 6-barreled monstrosity shooting high-velocity armor-piercing rounds. At least 6 times the damage output of most disgusting single-barreled tanks. It is the largest unit in the game, so good luck moving over bridges or squeezing through even medium-sized gaps. Might as well be a glorified turret most times, or be at the end of the line of the death parade before it destroys the enemy fortress.
Like in Planetary Fortress, this thing is hellaciously slow, even with simple things such as turning the turret, allowing things like scout cars and other fast units to blow right past this thing as it only gets 1 or 2 shots off. Now, to be fair, those shells would decimate such things if they hit in the first place, and despite having 6 barrels, it still does not have an amazing fire rate, allowing a large group of infantry units to circle this thing and have it waste most of its rounds. It will kill most infantry in 1 hit, but it does not have any type of splash damage, which is like a medieval knight trying to throw hands against a gorilla wielding a sledgehammer. For all those Mike Tyson fans out there, it does not end well. Alrighty, second to last we have the Grippy Tank, otherwise known as the Siege Tank from StarCraft 1 and 2. However, we will mainly be focusing on 2 since that is the newest tank and there is functionally no real difference between games. Having 2 separate modes between the basic and siege variety, its main cannon in the siege mode is so strong that it requires extra stability just to fire without breaking or pushing back the tank as a whole. Then, by the way, it's called Mjolnir because it brings down the thunder. Otherwise, while not in siege mode, the tank has to rely on its still admittedly good 80mm plasma cannon.
While being a strong centerpiece in the Terran defense, it still has the same problems as most of the other good tanks in this list. It can't do anything to air units, and as a bit of a bonus, it's moderately fast but still quite slow overall. But that it only has alright hit points. These tanks are meant to be the middle to end of a push, or an impenetrable wall of tank shells in siege mode. So it's either a solid choice in most fictional settings, it neither has the firepower nor armor to compete with some of the heaviest hitters out there.
The best normal tank for last, we now have the Mammoth tank to go over from Command & Conquer. Specifically, the Mark III from Command & Conquer 3. Thicker than a bowl of oatmeal. You gotta spell thick with 3 C's for this one. A double-barreled monster, a baseline unit, having 150mm twin cannons. And as the war progressed, they were fitted with 150mm railguns instead for maximum firepower. This puppy also covers the one thing that no other tank on the entire list does. It actually comes equipped with decent anti-air. 4 reloadable 120mm missile pods. These missiles are also able to shoot ground targets for additional anti-ground firepower.
Now keep in mind, despite having anti-air, it has slow reloading for it, making it vulnerable to large swarms of anti-air, or some of the most tanky anti-air units. To these ship brick houses, it does move glacially slow and has a terrible build time. Most of the tanks on this list, with long enough range or fast enough movement, it can be whittled down. Sadly, unlike its predecessor, it doesn't have self-repair, unless fully promoted. The other 2 things about this vehicle is the fact that it can gain immunity to EMP, reduce damage, taken at the cost of fire rate and movement speed via the reactive armor upgrade. It can also, due to its size, crush all infantry and most smaller vehicles. Let us remember and come together. Whether your tank is terrible, has paper armor, or moves slower than your average school bus. Or your tank is a mobile fortress that obliterates anything in its path. Your tank will never be better than the Landmaster, baby! Let's go!
I'm sorry, the land what now?